Welcome to The Funnel. My name is John Shea, and I'm the president of Alignment Group. This is episode 174 of The Funnel. Hiring a salesperson. Interview warning signs. Before we get started, I just want to apologize for something. Last week, I had a bit of a hiccup with the publishing site for my podcast, and one of my podcasts was inadvertently deleted. And it had to be uploaded and published again. So some of you subscribers received the same podcast twice. So again, my apologies for that. Hopefully it won't happen again. Maybe you enjoyed it a second time around. Our agenda for today, we're going to talk about the resume. A little bit of a different spin on the resume. Who are you interviewing? The cultural fit, articulating success, and not prepared to interview you. So let's start with the resume. Now, over the last few months and a number of podcasts over the last couple of years, you've heard me talk about interviewing and hiring sales reps and how to take a deeper dive into the resume and ask the right questions. This is really about the resume adding up. For example, the dates of employment don't add up. A lot of times managers sort of take a cursory look. They look at the job history. They see the kind of roles they've played before. They're more interested in asking questions and taking a deeper dive with the person than really understanding what's in the resume. And I'm going to tell you, sometimes the years, they don't add up. So somebody worked from 2010 to 2014 at a job, and then there's like a 6-month gap. And they pick up another job, or there's a year gap. So you're looking at that, and for me, that's, okay, I'm taking notes here. I want to figure out why this doesn't add up. Why is there a gap here? And in some cases, I noticed multiple gaps. Okay, a typo. I can understand one if you can explain that to me and prove it to me. Other times, there are significant gaps for reasons, and you want to know what those reasons are. Obviously, there are certain things you can and can't ask in an interview, but you need to get a legitimate response back. That's a basic thing to look at here, basic problem. And it's amazing to me how many times that doesn't get picked up. I remember years ago, a manager came to me, one of my managers said, hey, I'm thinking about interviewing this rep. Can you take a look at the resume? And we have our process and the whole 9 yards, the assessment and qualifying. But she was kind of on the fence about interviewing. And I looked at the resume and I sat down and took out a pad of paper. And I started kind of writing my notes on everything that I noticed. And then I put it together in an email. I said, I'll get back to you later. And I put it together in an email and I sent it to her. And she came in and sat down and said, you know what? I didn't notice any of that. And I said, well, I own that a little bit because I'm your manager and I should be teaching you that stuff. These are all learning experiences for me. This is how I get to this point. I did this as a natural thing, walking through the resume and picking it apart. But I guess I took it for granted that other people would do that. And from that point forward with my managers, I would sit down and we would go through resumes. And I'd look at the finer points and I'd pick out things that maybe they didn't see. Things that they could grab a hold of and say, hey, you're right. This doesn't make sense. I need to figure this out. Another red flag in the resume for me is too many jobs. It's obvious in today's world that people move from job to job. Sometimes they leverage that to a better position. Other times they're doing it they're moving or they're looking to do something different. And I get that. And if they've had a lot of jobs, maybe current job's been less than 6 months, I have a problem with that. And they've done that a couple of times. That speaks to decision making, right? Maybe the job's not a fit for them. Maybe it's the company, et cetera, et cetera. But how many times are you going to make that mistake? So I look at that and I decide, is this right? And I formulate some questions around that. Maybe if it's too much, I don't even interview. If there's too many gaps and there's too many jobs, and I love the one where they got laid off. Now I'll give you a scenario where it happens. Company A buys Company B. There's an overlap in sales rep. Company A is the big gorilla in the room, and it doesn't really matter how good Company B sales reps are. Maybe they just let them go because they want to keep their sales reps. That happens. I'm not going to sit there and say that kind of political stuff doesn't happen. It does happen. And there's a legitimate reason for that. But if you tell me you get laid off because a company's downsizing and you were a big producer for them, that doesn't make sense. You're not an expense. your profit and revenue. You're driving money into the company. Why would they lay you off? And if you get that 2 or 3 times in a resume, that's a red flag, a huge red flag. And I've seen that all the time. And I've literally had recruiters try to sell me on people being laid off. And I just sit there and listen, and I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. They've been laid off 3 times, and the excuse that you're giving me is verbatim the same excuse for all 3. How is that possible? It just doesn't add up for me. So I kick that back. I'm not going to interview somebody. That's a big red flag for me. I'm not even going to think about moving forward on that. Next, I want to talk about who are you interviewing? Okay? And I get the whole interview process. Go back and listen to the podcast on the interview process. That's not what I'm talking about here. What I'm talking about is maybe just a little bit deeper dive into this person. What I do in an interview and through the questioning process is I will challenge them. I will challenge them on things that they said or things that they've done, and I'll give them constructive criticism. And I'm going to look for how they respond to that. People who get very defensive aren't the kind of people I want to work with, right? Because my role in managing you is to give you constructive criticism. And quite frankly, I accept it myself. If I've done something and one of my sales reps comes to me and says, hey, this, you did this, I'll take it under advisement. You're right. I kind of misfired on that. I'm sorry. I'm going to work on that. It's okay, even from people who work for you or your own bosses. But if people get defensive and they can't get past that, I have a real problem. I have a real problem with somebody who can't respond appropriately. That means they're going to be hard to coach, right? Am I going to be able to coach them? Am I going to be able to work with them? Maybe I give them an exercise through the interview, a role-playing exercise, and I ask them how they do, and they get real defensive when I give them constructive criticism. And if they can't tell me not only the positives, but where they think they misfired, that's a real problem for me. That means they don't think they can do any better, that anybody can tell them how to do any better, that they know what they're doing 100% of the time. And no one's like that. The second is no accountability. Every time you ask them a question about something that went wrong or something that didn't work, it's somebody else's fault. It drives me nuts. If you can't be accountable for your actions, then how the heck are you going to move forward and be successful? How is it that it's always somebody else's fault? I live this in my own world, in my own personal life, with my own children. They'll tell you. I don't want to hear about the teacher. I don't want to hear about the kid next to you talking. I just don't want to hear it. Own up to the responsibility for what you did and your role in that. Take control, take responsibility. If you can't be accountable for what you do day in and day out, we have a problem. And sales reps have to be the ultimate in accountability. You don't want to hear about the economy. Don't tell me about the economy. Everybody lives in this economy. We're going to just go home? Don't tell me about price pressures or bad brochures. Whatever else it is you want to talk about. Be accountable for yourself and reflect that in the conversation. If I'm interviewing somebody and they're defensive, that tells me they can't be coached. That tells me I'm going to have a real hard time working with them. If they're not accountable, how can they take control of situations? How can I teach them how to move forward if they're not responsible for anything bad that goes wrong? Next is the poor outlook. Now, I will qualify this. Occasionally, a poor outlook is a direct result of the current situation that they're in. So you need to take a deeper dive in that. Our assessment does bring up outlook, and we'll tell you if they have a poor outlook. It really behooves you to peel back the layers on that. But if they're one of these negative Nellies and it's always down and the world's ending, et cetera, do I really want to bring that into my environment? I need somebody with a positive outlook. I need someone who's driven to move forward. And when you have a poor outlook, you're not going to be good at your job. You're not going to be a high performer consistently. It's just not in your DNA. So if you can't show me that positive outlook, you can't be accountable, and you're defensive, I'm moving on. Those are red flags in interview, and I'm walking. I'm saying this is not going to work. And I will give them every opportunity to turn it around when we're talking through these things. I want to make sure that I know who you are before I make that decision. But make no mistake about it. If these things are glaring, I'm moving on. Next, I want to talk about cultural fit, because cultural fit is extremely important to me. I need to know that you're going to work in my environment and that I'm going to work for you. Does this feel natural? Right? Does it feel like, hey, this person is going to fit into our culture? 89% or 90% or something. I read that somewhere. Don't quote me on it, but a high percentage of people, new hires, leave because they're not a cultural fit. Maybe they don't fit in with your core beliefs or your behaviors. Okay? If you're a company that does a lot of volunteering on the weekends, does really cool stuff, and gets out there with people and just does all these things, and this person doesn't want to do that, it's not a good fit. What motivates them? We need to know what motivates them. And does it match what motivates our company? So you give them a list of core values. This is what we do, and this is how we do it. And ask how they've done that. Has it worked for you? How are you most productive? I can tell you this. I am not productive in an open office environment where everybody's sitting around looking at each other and I can hear all that background noise. Drives me crazy. I would not be a good fit in your company sitting in the middle of a bullpen. It's not that I need a big closed door office with a big desk. I just need that space where I can focus. Sure, I can put on my headphones and I can throw on some music, but too many distractions. I can't get my work done. So I'm not going to be a good fit if it's a big open area where everybody's there's a foosball table over there and they can get ice cream over here. It's just not going to work for me. So that's part of the cultural fit. What motivates me? What motivates them? What motivates the company? These are the things that are important when you're looking for cultural fit. If it's not going to be a fit, I'm going to move on for their benefit and mine. And if they're smart, they're going to say, you know what? This doesn't fit for me. I don't know if I can work in this environment. And that's okay. That's better than the latter. Them coming to work and deciding they can't work there. I just had a client tell me an administrator came in one day, and left. They said, it's just not a good fit for me. How does that happen? How? One day. And they walked out. Okay, I know on the screen it says it's episode 74, but it's really episode 174. I'm going to own up to this typo, but I'm not going to stop recording this podcast. So episode 174, that's the one we're on now. I'm offering you a live coaching call that we can turn into a podcast on your hiring situation. So this is how it works. Go to the website, episode 174, click the live coaching call. You'll see it in the episode show notes. Bottom of the page and on the side. You click on that. That'll take you to my schedule. Pick a date and time. You have to fill out some stuff, basic stuff, your name. And I'm going to ask you a few questions. They're not required, but it'll help me coach you. You fill that out. We'll get it on the schedule, and then you'll be on the podcast. So I'm offering that to listeners. So head on over to alignment-group.com. Click the podcast, the Funnel Podcast, episode 174, and you'll find live coaching call. Image there, just click on it, and the rest is history. Okay, next, can they articulate success? What do I mean by that? Well, there's a couple of things. One, if they're really vague on what's happening in their world and how they did it, I'm throwing up the red flag. So here's what I'm talking about. Somebody lays out how they were successful in their last position. And they're impressive when they talk to me. And they did it this way. I did this many demos of this SaaS software, and this is how I did it. This is how I achieved the demo. I knew if I got to the demo phase, et cetera, I'd close this much business. Great. So you did a lot of demos. How many calls did it take to get to those demos? What did it take? How many of those demos did you close? What was your ratios? How many of those prospects end up buying? So I want to know, great, you did a lot of demos, you sold a lot of business. Fill in the blanks for me. I make the greatest chocolate chip cookie. Cool. How about the recipe? All the ingredients, all the measurements of those ingredients, the order in which they're placed together, how they're mixed, how you put them on the pan, the temperature of the oven, how long it cooks. You follow my point here? Fill in the blanks. Don't tell me you make the greatest chocolate chip cookie, and then you can't tell me how it's done. I don't know. I just throw a bunch of stuff together, and these great cookies come out. Not true. So I want to know, can you prove it? Can you fill in the blanks? If they're vague on that stuff and they can't answer you and they dance around it, you know a political answer when you're getting one, run. Because they don't have the ability to articulate their success. They're not proving to you what they've done. And I want to know the context. And people are going to get upset at me for this. But Representative A that sells 200% in a territory does not necessarily translate to your company selling 200%. Maybe similar industry, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the same. Why? Because I don't have context. I don't know their company. What kind of infrastructure do they have? What kind of support do they have? How's their pricing set up? Are they inbound leads? Do they have a whole support staff setting up appointments for them? Or are they expected to go out and do all the appointments on their own, just like my company? I don't have enough context to make that decision. So I'm searching for context. I want to know. Is it partially because the company was really good, provided a great territory, had really deep roots, a good business development program, was very mature and well known in the marketplace versus and priced appropriately, where I am new, up and coming, priced a little bit higher. People don't know us as well. Apples and oranges. So what's the context? Did the territory support their efforts and drive some of that revenue? It's not a knock on them. I just need to know from my own understanding so I can make a good decision on you. And if you can't tell me that or give me that context, red flag. You can't prove it, red flag. You can't tell me how you succeeded, red flag. Next, they're not prepared to interview you, right? So this is pretty simple, okay? This one's not that hard. They know very little about your company or it's very vague. They did a quick search on their smartphone before they walked in the door, and they have no questions for you. Okay, and I might add to this, even though it's not on this for those of you watching the video. It's not on the screen. But here's what I would say. Their questions are related to things that really aren't part of that conversation at this point. When they start asking you about stuff like 401k and medical, those things are important. I get that. You'd think they'd want a deeper understanding of the company. Am I going to be a fit here? I want to know more about your products and services. This is what I've read online about you. This is what I've read online about your company. They can go to LinkedIn. They can go to the website. They can read blogs. There's plenty of information about any company out there. If they can't ask you questions and they're not prepared to interview you and they know very little about your company or products, that tells me they don't give a damn. Why would you want to hire? Red flag. Why would you want to hire somebody like that? They're looking for a job. They're not looking for a career. And if they're just looking for a job, they can go do that somewhere else, not here. I want somebody who's really interested in working with me and really interested in working with our company and has some very good questions about what we do and how we do it based on their research. Bottom line. That's all the time we have for the funnel today. So listen to me. Listen clearly. Subscribe to the funnel. Alignment-group.com/the funnel. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Google+. Contact me, Jay Shea at alignment-group.com. You can find the website, alignment-group.com. Until next time, keep filling the funnel.